At a family dinner, my father announced that I wouldn't be getting any more pocket money because you're a grown man now, then handed my younger brother a brand new iPhone. A month later, my brother called crying saying, "Dad took my laptop too, he said I was turning into me." I live about an hour away now, closer to Boston. I'd built a life for myself, stable job as a paralegal, a one-bedroom apartment I was proud of, a boyfriend who adored me even though I had a hard time believing I deserved it. My dad, Emery, called me the week before and invited me to dinner. Said he wanted a grown-up evening with just his kids. I asked if I could bring Will, and he paused, then said, "Let's keep it family." That should have been a red flag. But I ignored it. I still do that sometimes, pretend things are normal so I don't have to confront how far from normal they actually are. Cyrus was already home from college when I got there. He's 19, in his second year at RISD studying animation. Talented kid. Really brilliant. Sweet, too, much softer than my father liked. I always tried to shield him from that. Took him to the library when Dad yelled. Brought him to see his favorite movies when he explosioned a test. I filled a role that our mother had long abandoned. She left when I was 12. Just vanished. One day she was cooking dinner, the next day she was gone. She sent a postcard from Miami 6 months later with a note, "I'm finding myself. Take care of each other." Dad never talked about it. Never told us what happened, or how it affected him. He just closed up, doubled down on discipline, and made it clear that love, if we were going to get it, would be something we had to earn. For me, that meant being useful. Independent. Quiet. For Cyrus, it meant becoming the son he always wished he had. I learned how to disappear emotionally before I even got to high school. Cyrus learned to apologize for just being himself. So when I sat across from Dad that night and heard him say, "You won't be getting any more pocket money, Kira," I didn't even flinch. It wasn't about the money. I haven't asked him for a dime since I turned 18. I've had 2 jobs, paid for school, paid my rent, never missed a utility bill. What stung wasn't the insult, it was the lie that I'd ever relied on him. The narrative he was spinning in front of Cyrus, like I was some kind of leech. But then he turned to Cyrus, and in the same breath handed him a brand new iPhone. "No more excuses now," he said. "Keep those grades up." I didn't say anything. I wanted to. I wanted to ask how he could justify it, why he always treated us like we were different species instead of siblings. But I knew better. He didn't explain himself. He never had to. He was the judge and the jury in our family. There was no cross-examination. After dinner, I grabbed my coat and purse quietly. Cyrus followed me to the door. "I didn't ask for it," he said, eyes wide, nervous. "I know," I said, forcing a smile. "It's not about the phone." But it was. And he knew it too. The weeks that followed were strained. I stopped texting as much. I skipped our usual weekend check-ins. Not because I didn't love Cyrus, but because I didn't trust myself not to fall back into that familiar role, emotional caretaker, buffer, fixer of wounds I didn't cause. Then the call came. It was just past midnight. Will was asleep next to me. My phone lit up with Cyrus's name. I picked up immediately. He was crying. I could barely understand him at first. "He took my laptop," he said again and again. "He said I was making excuses. He said I'm turning into you." I sat up in bed, heart pounding. What happened? "He was checking my grades online," Cyrus said, still gasping between sobs. "I got a B in one of my electives. He lost it. Said I was slipping. That I was becoming soft. Just like you." That broke something in me. Because I knew exactly what Dad meant. To him, being like me meant you weren't good enough. It meant you didn't live up to his impossible standard of resilience. It meant you had a soul. I told Cyrus to pack a bag. "I'm driving down," I said. I was at the house in under an hour. I didn't knock. I let myself in, and there was Dad, standing in the kitchen like he was expecting me. "He called you," he said, as if this were a mild inconvenience. "You destroyed his laptop," I said. "He needs that for school." "He needs a wake-up call," he replied. "He's starting to coast. I won't have another disappointment." I didn't respond. There was no use arguing with him. He believed in fear, not logic. His version of love was tough, but it wasn't love, it was control dressed in discipline's clothing. I found Cyrus upstairs, sitting on his bed with his duffel bag packed. He looked small. "I don't know what to do anymore," he said. "You don't have to figure it out tonight," I told him. "Just come home with me." He hesitated, then nodded. We walked past our father without another word. He didn't try to stop us. He just watched, and said, "He'll be back. They always come back." But Cyrus didn't. We set up a makeshift workstation in our tiny apartment. We made space in the bedroom closet so Cyrus could hang up his clothes. We gave up our dining table so he'd have a place to draw. I called in a favor from a coworker whose cousin was getting rid of a used MacBook. It wasn't brand new, but it worked. And that was enough. He finished the semester. And something in him began to shift. I saw it in the way he stopped apologizing for existing. In the way he smiled more often. In the way he laughed again, really laughed. One night, he came out of his room with a little sketch in his hand. It was a cartoon version of me, holding a tiny, anxious version of him under a massive umbrella. Rain was falling all around us. The caption said, "I didn't know how soaked I was until she covered me." That was when I started crying. And I haven't stopped fighting for him since. Cyrus's drawing stayed taped to our fridge for months. Every time I walked by it, it reminded me why I'd done what I did, why I'd peeled him out of that house, out of that man's reach. He didn't ask for rescue. But he needed it. The same way I did, once. After that first week, the adjustment wasn't easy. Not because we clashed, he was easy to live with. But because I saw the toll of everything he'd been carrying, everything he'd been pretending wasn't affecting him. When you're raised under a roof where approval is performance-based, you get real good at pretending things are okay. He still flinched a little when I raised my voice, even if I was just excited or passionate. He still apologized too quickly, even for things that weren't his fault, dropping a glass, leaving the light on. I gently told him to stop, and he'd nod, then whisper, "Sorry," without even realizing it. Will was patient through all of it. He had an older sister who battled addiction for years, and I think that gave him this steady sort of understanding, not pity, but empathy that wasn't performative. He knew how to give Cyrus space, but also when to step in and include him, especially when I could tell Cyrus felt like he was intruding on our lives. One Friday night, we were all on the couch watching some ridiculous sci-fi movie when Cyrus suddenly asked, "Did you ever think he'd be different?" He didn't say who. He didn't have to. "No," I said truthfully. "But I used to wish it so hard, I'd make myself sick over it." He nodded. "Me too." That conversation stuck with me. Because for a long time, I told myself Dad was just old-fashioned, strict, or a product of his generation. I even defended him to people who didn't deserve to hear my excuses. But what Cyrus said in those 3 words, "me too," was all the confirmation I ever needed that we had both lived under the same emotional drought. And it was never about misunderstanding him. It was about finally acknowledging that it was never going to rain. Word got out eventually. My Aunt Roslyn, Dad's sister, called me a week later. She'd always been kind to us growing up, but rarely involved. She lived up in Maine, a solid 4-hour drive away, and her presence in our lives was more holiday card than hands-on. But I picked up, not knowing what she'd say. "Your father told me what happened," she said, flatly. "Oh?" "Said you stormed in like a teenager and corrupted Cyrus. That you took him in to spite him." I rolled my eyes. Did he also say why Cyrus was crying in the middle of the night? Why he destroyed $1,000 laptop instead of having a conversation? Rosalind was quiet for a moment. I just wanted to hear your side. So I told her. Not the sugar-coated version. Not the soft edits I'd given other people in my life. I told her what it was like growing up with Emery, how you had to earn every shred of warmth, how silence filled the house when you didn't perform, and how failure wasn't an option, but neither was vulnerability. To my surprise, she sighed. He was like that with me, too, she said. Different version, same tune. I got married at 20 just to get out of there. That hit me harder than I expected. There was so much history in our family that nobody talked about. Pain that got buried and passed on like some invisible inheritance. I should have been there more, Rosalind added. I'm sorry for that. I told her it was okay. I meant it, too. Because what mattered wasn't that she hadn't helped back then, it was that someone in our family finally acknowledged the reality. For once, I wasn't the only one saying, this happened. Later that week, Emery sent me an email. The subject line just said, enough. I stared at it for a long time before opening it. The body of the message was short, you've made your point. I don't know what more you want from me. I gave you everything you needed. You're welcome. There was no salutation. No signature. That was his version of an olive branch, cold, rigid, and full of ego. I didn't respond. Cyrus was doing better by then. He was attending all his classes, started talking more in the mornings, even asked Will for help cooking. One night, I came home from work to the smell of burnt rice and the sound of laughter coming from the kitchen. I didn't even care about the disaster on the stove. That sound, genuine, belly-deep laughter from Cyrus, was something I hadn't heard since before Mom left. He started seeing a therapist. I found a sliding scale center not far from our apartment, and though he was hesitant at first, he committed to it. Every Thursday afternoon, he'd come back with something new to say. One time, he told me, she said I have complex trauma. He said it like it was a discovery. Like finally having a name for the invisible thing pulling him down made it more real, more manageable. You do, I told him. We both do. There was one night that changed everything again. It was early spring. Cold still clung to the sidewalks like stubborn frost, but the days were longer, and things felt lighter. I was working late when I got a call from an unknown number. It was Dad. I froze before I picked it up, my heart thudding in my ears. I thought for a second he might be sick, or worse, that something had happened to Rosalind or someone else. But it wasn't that. He wanted to meet. I told him I'd think about it. When I told Cyrus later, he looked at me like I'd said I was planning to walk into a lion's den. You don't have to, he said. You don't owe him anything. I know, I replied. But I need to know if there's anything left to salvage. For me. I didn't sleep much that night. When I finally agreed to meet, it was neutral ground, an old diner halfway between our towns, the kind of place where the waitress knows your name and the pie case is always full. Dad was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth by the window with a coffee in front of him. He hadn't aged much physically, but his face looked harder. Like stone that had been weathered too long. He stood when I approached, like it was a formality he remembered from another life. Kira. Emery. We sat. The silence was heavy. I never meant to hurt him, he said eventually. Or you. You didn't mean to, I repeated. But you did. 4 years. He didn't argue. But he didn't apologize either. I raised you the only way I knew how. That's not enough, I said, simply. He looked away. I thought if I made you tough, you'd survive anything. We did, I said. But that's not the same as living. He didn't respond. Not for a long time. The waitress came by and refilled our coffee cups. Neither of us touched them. Finally, he asked, Is Cyrus okay? I looked him in the eye. He's healing. Without you. That landed. His hand shook slightly as he reached for the mug. But he still didn't say sorry. I realized then that he probably never would. He wasn't capable. Not in the way I wanted. But I wasn't there for his redemption. I was there to bury something. Not to make peace, but to stop carrying the war. After that diner meeting, I didn't cry. Not in the car. Not on the way home. Not even later when Will gently asked me how it went, offering a plate of leftover stir-fry and one of those silent, you don't have to talk if you don't want to kind of glances. I just said, I think that was the last time I'll ever see him. And Will, without asking why or pushing further, nodded. We went to bed like it was any other night. But something had shifted. It wasn't dramatic or loud. It wasn't even sad. It was just final. Like I'd shut a door that was never meant to be open that long. Cyrus didn't ask too many questions about it. He only said, good. You needed that. And that was enough. Life got quieter in the weeks after that. For the first time in a while, my energy wasn't split between surviving my own life and protecting someone else from drowning in theirs. Cyrus started doing commissions, portraits, logo designs, little character sketches for indie creators. It wasn't much, but it paid better than expected. One night he came into the living room with a PayPal notification on his phone and said, I made $100 drawing a cartoon cat that looks like someone's therapist. We laughed until our faces hurt. That was the thing about living with someone you love and trust, you find joy in the weirdest, smallest stuff. It's not perfect. Sometimes we'd argue over dishes or whose turn it was to clean the bathroom, but it never turned into war. There was no edge of fear. No guilt. Just life, messy and ordinary. We still didn't talk about our dad much. But every now and then, a memory would sneak in sideways. Cyrus would mention how Dad used to criticize his posture during dinner. Or how he made him rewrite essays 3 or 4 times because there's no such thing as good enough. The more distance we got, the more clearly we could see how much of us had been shaped, not by love, but by fear masquerading as structure. One night, we were sitting out on the fire escape with mugs of cheap grocery store tea, watching the city lights flicker, when Cyrus said something I'll never forget. I think I used to think he loved me more than you. He didn't look at me when he said it. Just stared out over the rooftops. I know, I said quietly. He finally turned his head. That was bullcrap, wasn't it? Yeah, I said. It was. There was no anger in his voice. No bitterness. Just a kind of quiet sadness you get when you realize your entire childhood had a script someone else wrote, and you were just trying to get your lines right. A few months passed. Cyrus started working on a short animated film for a student competition, something abstract and a little surreal, based on the idea of inherited silence. He didn't say it was about Dad. But I knew it was. It was full of metaphors, gray houses, rooms that grew smaller the longer you stayed in them, voices that cracked like glass. It was haunting, even in its early sketches. One afternoon, he asked me to watch a rough cut. I sat on the couch with my laptop balanced on my knees, and as the 5-minute film unfolded, I felt every muscle in my body lock up. There was no dialogue. Just music. Ambient, eerie, beautiful. A child character tried to speak but the sound kept getting swallowed by the walls. Every time they reached for the doorknob to leave the house, the door moved farther away. Finally, the child sat down in the middle of the shrinking room and started drawing. And the more they drew, the brighter the lines became until they lit up the entire house. That's when the door finally opened. When it ended, I closed the laptop and looked at him. I don't think I breathed the whole time, I said. He smiled. A real smile. Good. We submitted it together, well, he submitted it. I just triple-checked the file name and made sure the form was filled out right. It felt like a small thing, but it mattered. Because we were used to doing everything under pressure, under watchful eyes. Now, we were doing things for ourselves. He got accepted into the competition showcase in New York. It wasn't a huge deal, not some Sundance-level event, but it was his. It was something born entirely out of his own work, his own heart. He was scared to go. Said he didn't know if he deserved it. Said he wasn't sure if he was ready. "You'll never be ready," I told him. "But you're going anyway." He left that weekend on a bus with his portfolio, a USB drive, and a thrifted blazer I helped him pick out. Will and I waved him off from the terminal like parents sending a kid to camp. I cried in the car. Not because I was sad, but because he was finally becoming something my father never allowed him to be, free. While he was gone, I got another email. From Emery. This one was longer. A few paragraphs. Still no apology, but I could tell he was unraveling. "Cyrus won't answer my calls. He's ignoring my messages. I hope you're happy with what you've done." I gave him structure, discipline, the tools to succeed. And now he's throwing it all away because you couldn't handle being corrected. He's wasting his potential with cartoons and nonsense. He should be studying something real. Something that will actually matter. I didn't respond. Instead, I printed the email and folded it in half. Then I tossed it in the recycling bin. That kind of bitterness had nothing left to teach me. Cyrus came back from New York a week later, buzzing with energy. "I talked to this producer who said I should keep submitting stuff," he said. "She gave me her card." "That's huge," I said. He looked stunned. "Do you think it's real? Like, am I actually doing something?" I hugged him. "You've been doing something for a long time," I said. "Now the world's finally noticing." That night, we ordered pizza and stayed up too late watching dumb reality shows. The kind with fake drama and over-the-top confessionals. And somewhere between episodes, Cyrus said, "I think I'm starting to forget what it felt like to live with him." I didn't know what to say at first. But then I realized that's what healing was. Not the erasure of memory, but the fading of its grip. "You don't have to forget it," I said. "You just don't have to keep reliving it." By the time summer rolled in, everything had changed. Cyrus had a small but growing network of mentors and peers from the animation showcase. He was building his own website, working on new projects, even considering transferring to a school in New York to be closer to the opportunities. I could see the gears in his mind turning faster, freer. He smiled more. He talked about the future like it was something he was allowed to want. And me? I'd quietly taken steps of my own. That email Emery had sent, the one full of rage and condescension, had stayed in my mind even after I threw the printed copy away. Not because of the content, but because of what it confirmed. He still believed he had the right to define us. Still believed we were failures for not living within his rules. He didn't care what Cyrus wanted. He cared about winning. About obedience. About control. I realized then what my revenge would be. Not loud. Not dramatic. Not cruel. Just a life lived so well, it made every one of his rules look ridiculous. So, I did what Emery would have hated most, I told our story. Not to shame him. Not to destroy him. But to free myself. I started writing a piece for a legal blog I contributed to occasionally, one focused on trauma-informed practices in family law. I masked the names, changed details for anonymity, but the message was clear: some forms of parental damage don't leave bruises. They leave identities warped, children unsure of their worth, and adults who only learn to breathe once they're miles away. It gained traction, way more than I expected. People commented, shared, sent emails. Other lawyers reached out to say they'd never considered what emotional discipline looked like behind closed doors. A therapist I quoted in the piece contacted me to ask if I'd be willing to speak at a conference panel. I said yes. And then something strange happened. Cyrus's film, the short he made about inherited silence, was featured in an online animation spotlight. It got picked up by a small indie platform that showcases work by emerging artists. They loved the visuals. The metaphor. The emotional weight. One comment under the film said, "I don't know who this artist is, but they've clearly lived this. It's raw, and it's real. And it's brilliant." Cyrus cried when he read that. Happy tears this time. And as the recognition started building, slow, but steady, Emery started feeling the silence from our end more acutely. He called again. And again. And again. We didn't answer. But Emery wasn't done. He sent an email to Cyrus this time. A long, blistering one that said, in so many words, "You're wasting your life. You'll regret this. You'll need me one day." Cyrus showed it to me. He didn't cry. He didn't flinch. He just shook his head and said, "He really thinks we're still playing the same game." That was when we made the next move. Cyrus blocked his number. And I did too. We both agreed this wasn't temporary space. This was permanent distance. But the world had other plans. 2 weeks later, I got an unexpected call from my Aunt Rosalind again. "Have you heard?" she asked. "Heard what?" "Emery applied for a teaching award. Something from the college board. But apparently, someone on the committee read your article and connected the dots." My stomach flipped. "Wait, what?" "They weren't sure it was him," she said, "but your description, your background, it didn't take much digging. Some of his colleagues knew enough. It wasn't a takedown. Just the truth. And apparently, it made the rounds." I was stunned. I hadn't written the article to sabotage him. But I didn't feel bad either. Rosalind continued, "They quietly pulled his name from the shortlist. No announcement. Just gone. Emery never got the award. Never even got the nomination letter he expected. And the reason? Because the story he worked so hard to control finally slipped out of his grip. Our revenge wasn't fire and fury. It wasn't some cinematic showdown. It was Cyrus standing in a gallery months later, his film projected on the wall, with a crowd of strangers nodding, clapping, connecting to his pain, and his survival. It was me standing behind a podium at that trauma-informed family law panel, explaining how even high-functioning homes can raise children who feel like they don't deserve to be loved. It was Will, quietly squeezing my hand as I spoke, while Cyrus stood in the back of the room, arms crossed, eyes locked on mine. And it was the quiet that followed. The calm. The certainty that we had won. Because we'd built a life Dad couldn't understand, couldn't control, and couldn't touch. A life rooted not in fear, but in freedom. One last thing. 6 months after Cyrus's film went viral on that indie platform, he got an email from a larger studio. They were starting a program to fund original shorts by young animators. They wanted to meet with him. He looked at me when he read it. "You think this is real?" he asked, same as before. I didn't hesitate. "Yeah," I said. "This is yours." He ended up moving to New York that fall. I helped him pack. We hugged for a long time at the station. He looked older then. Not in a bad way. Just, "Sure. You okay?" he asked me. "I am now." And I meant it.